Joseph Smith wasn't the only prophet crowned by his followers. After his death, a man named James Strang claimed he had a letter from Joseph appointing him as a successor, then crowned himself king on a remote island in Lake Michigan. There was a church in Missouri that still believes Jesus will return to their patch of real estate, where they've been quietly waiting to build the true temple for over 150 years. Or what about that modern day prophet who received revelations from an angel named John the Baptist? Not the 1830s, but in the 1930s. And his followers still publish those messages today. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the Restoration's most bizarre and fascinating offspring: polygamist dynasties, secret priesthood lines, new scriptures, new prophets, and a whole lot of people who believe they, not the LDS Church in Utah, were the rightful heirs to Joseph's legacy. This is Mormonism Live, and this is Prophets, Polygamists, and Pretenders, inside Mormonism Schisms and Sects. Mr. Radio Free Mormon, how are you doing this fine night?
I'm great. Thank you, Mr. Eel. How are you?
I'm doing so good. Life is treating me well. How was your week?
Oh, fantastic. Absolutely. I'm getting a lot of exercise. The game is afoot. I tell you.
We're having a ton of fun with this, folks. Let me just note, let me put this up on the screen. I'm going to take that down. And first, in fact, let's do this first.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a nice little image that Kobe Reddish created for us, right? This is something to do with what we're going to do this Friday, right?
I'm the one in the middle, right?
No, that looks like you're the curmudgeon on the right, I think.
I would not have recognized myself. He looks so curmudgeonly.
He does look curmudgeonly, and you're usually smiling. That's me on the left, and I think that's Kobe listening to the two of us, and he's ponderizing whether what we're saying is going to make sense, and I think it will all make sense on Friday, because Friday we're going to have a special. I don't know if I want to call it Mormonism After Dark, if you want to ccall it Mormonism Live, but it will be Friday at 8 p.m. regardless. We're going to go into.
I think we should call it 10 Little Indians.
10 little. There will be a bunch of us, and it might be close to 10. We'll start at the normal Mormonism After Dark time of 8 p.m. But folks, you won't want to miss this. This has to do with that person out there who's sending out emails under the false pretenses of being me. And folks, you won't believe what we've found over the last couple of days. And I think it's all going to make sense and come into clarity when we get together on Friday to discuss all the things that have come into our purview in the last little bit.
Very much so. Yes, we're out scouring. We've got agents of ours. We've got volunteers scouring, helicopters, flashlights, spotlights, dogs.
Yes, there is everyone. We've got cybersecurity folks working on this. So we may have more updates by the time we get here on Friday, but I think we have enough, RFM. What do you think?
I think that I probably misspoke earlier when I said 10 Little Indians. I think that's where people keep dropping dead. I was trying to evoke the idea of an Agatha Christie novel at the end where the detective gathers all the suspects, all the characters into one room and then slowly begins to eliminate each and every one until only one is left. And then that person is identified in a dramatic way. We'll see if we can invoke or evoke that kind of atmosphere on Friday night.
If this was a game of Clue, I think we'd have a winner. We'd know it's Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick.
Yes.
And we'll see what happens here. So I'll just note that, folks, you will not want to miss. Again, we're the folks who broke down the Corden child murder, the Richard Nygren affair, and we've done numerous episodes behind the scenes where we have discovered things, RFM and I. We've spent a lot of time doing this, and this one's not going to be any different. I am tickled pink. So I can't wait for that, and we'll have a few friends with us along the way. Anything else you want to say on this episode? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next announcement.
Yeah, this has been one of those days when you come to work and and you think you know what you're going to be doing that day, and all of a sudden this train comes right through the middle of your office, or in this case,
Yeah.
your studio, which is both one and the same at this point.
Yep.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, okay, well, I'm off and doing this, but it's been a lot of fun. I expect I'll be doing a lot more of it tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah. The person knows who they are. They should be just a little nervous at this point. So I'll move on here. We've got an event coming up. You're coming down to Southern Utah from the state of Washington.
Yes.
You're going to be visiting here on May 10th. This will be an unfiltered a night with Radio Free Mormon and Bill Reel. We opened this up to 35 tickets, and 23 of those are sold already. So we have 12 tickets remaining.
Because originally it was just 20, right?
It was originally just 20. We got to 15 in just like a day and a half. So I got a location that we could get a few more people into, up the tickets to 35. And hopefully, folks, you will want to join us for that night. It's going to be a fun night. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to do, but I think we're going to make it a blast one way or another. I'm really excited about having you down here. And anything you want to say about the event?
Yes. Well, apparently we can't have a stage and we can't have a script.
No stage and no script.
That kind of limits things.
Why? Well, I know about the stage, but why no script?
I don't know, but it's what whoever wrote this up wrote on there. Who wrote this, Bill? I know I did not.
Hey, and I didn't write it either. So I put a few parameters in, and my trusted assistant helped me out with this one.
Is this where we throw Mother Teresa under the bus?
Mother Teresa or ChatGPT, either one of those two takes the blame. But this will be May 10th. This is coming up close. We're about 2-3 weeks away, right? 3 weeks away, 2.5 from you being here. So we're getting close. So folks, please grab your ticket. If you're going like, where do I get the ticket at? Well, the name for the URL there, the line there for the URL is on the screen. But also if you go into the live chat of YouTube, there's a pinned comment at the top. And if you go to that pinned comment, you will find this URL there, as well as a few other notes for tonight's show. Please like and subscribe. We're really excited that you're here. It should be a fun night tonight, and it's going to be a really fun night on Friday. So,
have you mentioned the food?
Yeah, the price of admission, the meal is included in that. So
I really think that's important to mention.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. So if you show up that night, we will be providing dinner. Dinner will be part of the price. And we'll have 3.5 hours, and we'll just make as much fun out of that as we can. Anything else on your mind before we get started?
No. As long as there's food.
Okay, long as there's food. All right, let me add this back to the stage. And
you have had this on the back burner for how long, Bill?
This has been a month and a half, maybe. We had things come up, folks, that we had in the studio. For instance, Carrie Swede and her book, I think, was just after I started working on this. We had Sam Nees. That's an interesting name, Sam Nees. He'll be on the show, or he was on the show, and he was on the show as I was preparing for this.
There was on March 26th, wasn't it, that Sam Nees was on the show?
It was March 25th, maybe, or 26th. It's you're going to want to remember that date. It's important when we get to Friday.
Yeah,
it's an important moment. So we'll see how that all unfolds. But folks, let me do this. Let me just note here. I'm going to put our names up on the screen so folks can see that. This here looks like a family history chart, but it's not. This is not taking your grandparents to the temple to do proxy work. Instead, this is all of the break-off factions, at least the major ones within Mormonism. Somebody messaged me today and said there's over 400 of them. There's definitely not 400 on this paper, but this lists the main break-off groups of Mormonism. And I always thought this was interesting because Joseph Smith comes along, 1820, has the first vision, 1830 publishes the Book of Mormon. And he claims he's received the restoration, that God has, for the last time, by the way, gotten his people through the apostasy, reorganized the church with priesthood keys, set it up like the ancient Church of Christ, made it so that it could never fall away. Remember, Wilford Woodruff, with a twinkle in his eyes, said, "The Lord will never permit me or any president of the church to lead this church astray. He would remove us on the spot if that happened."
Heber J. Grant, right?
Oh, I thought it was Wilford Woodruff originally.
Well, it's okay. He said something similar, that the Lord will
Okay.
never permit me to lead the church astray. It's not in the program.
Not in the program. Well,
No twinkle in Wilford Woodruff's eye. That's the main difference.
yeah, well, the program changed a lot of times.
He was
A
dead
little bit,
serious.
a lot before Wilford Woodruff, a lot after, and a few after Heber J. Grant too. So we'll
You know,
get
the
to some of
diagram
those.
looks like the Chicago rail yard.
Yeah, this is the new trade network economy that is being put together out in the world. This is how China and Taiwan and Vietnam are going to get goods to the U.S. This is the new route on the Pacific Ocean for the boats to travel. Anyway, all right, you're going like, what the hell is he saying? I'll just
I don't
note
even want to
this,
ask. I don't even want to ask.
this is all the breakoff churches. We're going to go into this tonight, and we'll see where we end up. But this should be a ton of fun. I'll start us off, and if we'll just take every other slide, and we'll present a ton of information. Got a lot of good images in here too. You'll see a lot of meeting houses of some of these groups, and you'll get a feel for what makes them unique. I think this will be a fun episode.
I will tell you,
please.
I was thinking, oh, this sounds like a snoozer. And then I went through the slides and I thought, wow, this is really, we're not going to go through all of them, Tim, because Tim had asked this in the live chat early on when I was still looking at the live chat before we went live. But we're not going to go through all of them. Okay. But the main ones, absolutely, we're going to hit. And all of these, I think I had at least heard of at some time or other, though I may not have known much about them. And this really organizes it nicely.
Great. So no overview of Mormon factions would be complete without mentioning the largest and most well-known. That was the one that you and I came from, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, with the day being lowercase, headquartered in Salt Lake City. This is the branch led by Brigham Young after Joseph Smith's death, and the one that built modern Mormonism as most people know it, complete with temples, missionary work, garments, although they're getting smaller and smaller all the time, priesthood hierarchy, and the ongoing role of living prophets. This is also the tradition that Radio Free Mormon and I come from, and the one that we focus on in nearly all of our content. Since most of our audience already knows the history inside and out, we won't linger here, but it's important to remember that all of the other branches we're covering in this series split from this main branch of Mormonism. Now, I don't mean they split from the Latter-day Saints, but they split from Joseph Smith's Mormonism or alongside it, each claiming to preserve something that this LDS church lost or abandoned. And with that, we'll start jumping into some of these. I'll just note some images. So you get the church.
It is the LDS church. It is the LDS church that is the mother of harlots in this diagram.
It is the mother of all harlots. So Brigham Young, the Moroni statue, the church logo, the Salt Lake Temple, these are what would identify this faction aside from the other factions quite easily.
Okay, I've got to explain this, don't I?
You can explain whatever it is you need to explain.
I apologize, everybody. Okay, the LDS church is the mother of harlots in this diagram because for ages, since I was a member of the church, although they've kind of hushed it up a little bit more in recent decades, the LDS church talked openly about the fact that the mother of harlots in the book of Revelation is the same thing as referenced in First Nephi in his vision, and that it is the Catholic Church is the mother of harlots, right? So, and the harlots are all the false churches that have gone from her. So at least that's the way I always understood it. That's the way it was always taught to me, I should say, in the Mormon church. So all I'm saying is that in this one, the role is reversed. She's on the other foot. And now the LDS church is the mother of harlots because she's the one giving birth to all of these varied sects.
And somebody noted this is the richest church in the world. Maybe it's definitely the richest branch of Mormonism. That's for sure as hell. All right. I'll let you read that one. I'm going to turn my camera off for just a split second and run and grab something. I'll be right back. But you want to read this to the audience.
Okay. Should I take my time reading?
I'll be quick.
All right. So Bill's going to run off and grab something really quick, and I'll read. Oh, the Reorganized, Sydney. After Joseph Smith's death in 1844, the leadership crisis cracked, the restoration wide open. One of the first and loudest claimants was Sidney Rigdon, Joseph's former first counselor. Rigdon argued he should act as guardian of the church until Joseph's son could take the reins, kind of like Henry VI. But when the majority sided with Brigham Young and the 12, Rigdon stormed off to Pennsylvania and started his own version of the church, insisting on calling it the original name, Church of Christ. Though at one point he named the church Church of Jesus Christ of the Children of Zion. It was like there was a competition to see who could have the longest church name.
Did you know that, by the way? The Church of Jesus Christ of the Children of Zion. Were you aware of that? Yeah, that's something I learned as well.
If you had asked me what was the name of the church that he found, I wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Yeah.
Rigdon's movement really never took off. At most, he gathered a few hundred followers, preaching against polygamy and centralized authority. He was big on spiritual gifts and prophetic gatherings, organizing schools of the prophets and solemn assemblies. But within a couple of years, his behavior grew erratic. His influence faded, and by 1847, he'd pretty much walked away from the whole thing. Most of his followers scattered, except one, William Bickerton.
And I put a couple pictures here of Rigdon when he was a little younger. That's probably about what he looked like when his head bumped up and down on the frozen tundra of
that really must have smarted.
Of Hiram, Ohio, at the Johnson farm just outside of Kirtland. But then on the right, you've got an older image of Sidney Rigdon. So there's that. The Bickertonites, which you just mentioned, when Sidney Rigdon's church collapsed, one loyal convert, William Bickerton, kept the restoration flame alive. After briefly aligning with Brigham Young's missionaries until polygamy became a deal breaker, Bickerton founded the Church of Jesus Christ in 1862. Deliberately dropping Latter-day Saints from the name, his followers, now known as the Bickertonites, still exist today. They accept only the Bible and the Book of Mormon as scripture. They reject polygamy and temple rites and emphasize spiritual gifts like healing and speaking in tongues. They believe Native Americans are Lamanites and prophesy an American Indian Moses will arise in the last days. Leadership is shared through a quorum of 12.
I wonder what that American Indian Moses' name might be. We'll find out here in a second.
I was going to say it, but I'll just leave it hanging there for us to get to later.
Moses.
Leadership is shared through a quorum of 12, and revelation must be confirmed by the body, not just one man, with 12 to 15,000 members, mostly in the U.S. They are the third largest Mormon denomination. Quiet, conservative, and off the radar, the Bickertonites offer a glimpse of what Mormonism might have looked like if it stayed in Ohio and skipped Utah altogether. And I'll just note William Bickerton on the left there, and there is a Bickertonite meeting house on the right. Now,
did he blink at just the worst possible time in that picture?
I'm not. He might be dead, and this might be one of those post-mortem photos. I don't know.
No, I didn't see one where it's all posed, but maybe it is.
I don't know. He definitely has his eyes closed at the wrong moment if he's alive and well.
Okay. Well, I hope he's okay.
You mentioned
should call 911.
You mentioned something about a American Indian Moses,
quote unquote. Guess who got baptized as a Bickertonite recently? Chief Mitiga becomes a Bickertonite. And then if you remember him, he's the guy with the thousands of birch bark scrolls that haven't shown up yet.
Somebody said he played his cards wrong. There was a lot more money to be made in the LDS Church doing something like this.
Yes, but that presumes something, which I don't agree with. I don't think that he's necessarily in it for money.
Okay. So that said, I was going to disagree with that as well for a different reason, which is if he decides he could never get away with translating those birch bark scrolls in the Latter-day Saint faith.
Right,
the top leadership would immediately excommunicate him and move him along.
That was made clear to him.
But he might be able to bring some revelation forth in the Bickertonite faith.
Yeah, absolutely. So he maybe might come up with another 10 Commandments or something. Is that what you're talking about?
You never know what a Mormon can do when it comes down to revelation. Chris Namelka is a good example of what can be done. All right, Mr. Radio Free Mormon, I'll turn the next one over to you.
All right, thank you. The Strangites, the crowned king of Mormonism. Right after Joseph Smith's death, newcomer James Strang claimed he had a letter from Joseph appointing him as successor. And guess what? People believed it. It was a fake, but they didn't know that then. Surprisingly, thousands believed him. Thousands. He started in Voorhee, Wisconsin, where he found new plates, but eventually moved his followers to Beaver Island, Michigan, where in 1850 he crowned himself king of Zion in robes and a tin crown. Yes, really. Strang revived early Mormon practices, new scripture, the book of the law of the Lord, polygamy, after first preaching monogamy. So he was a monogamy affirmer before he was a polygamy denier before he was a monogamy affirmer, or vice versa. Saturday worship, even women in the priesthood. So there were women who were ordained to the priesthood. Is that right, Bill?
Say that again. I was moderating the chat where I see someone causing a little bit of trouble again, and I'm just asking.
Oh, just zap them. It feels so good to act like Zeus from the top of Mount Olympus and just hurl those thunderbolts.
They're coming if that person doesn't chill out. So, okay, go ahead. What was your question?
It's quite invigorating, actually. I was just talking about that they went ahead and the Strangites allowed women to have the priesthood.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. If it says it right there?
It says it right there.
Then we got it. Then they've got the priesthood.
His kingdom blended restoration theology with royal theatrics and Mosaic law. It all ended in 1856, which is not that much later. It's like a decade, right? When Strang was assassinated, likely with government complicity. Wow. His followers were driven off the island, but a small group survived. Today, a few dozen Strangites still hold to his teachings in Wisconsin and California at the Yellow Deli, quietly preserving the legacy of the only Mormon king in American history, other than Joseph Smith, of course.
And I did put a note in here. Joseph Smith, you brought this to my attention, by the way. I knew this, but I'd sort of forgot it. And when you were going over the slideshow, you made a note that James Strang wasn't the only king. Joseph Smith, as king in the Council of 50 in April 1844, during meetings of the Council of 50, Joseph Smith was anointed and sustained as a king, more specifically as king and ruler over Israel on earth. All he needed was his scepter, but he ended up dying pretty soon after that. So the scepter never got to be held.
Yeah.
So there's that. I'll just note there, James Strang on the left, James Strang's book, Law of the Lord, which, again, this guy produced scripture. Everybody thinks this is so damn difficult, but Chris DeMelka, James Strang, and we'll see more. Yeah,
if James Strang can do it, anybody can do it. Look at that face. It reminds me of a question mark.
And then you've got a Strangite meeting house up there in the top right-hand corner. So there's that. That's a lot of forehead, though, by the way.
Hey, watch it with the forehead comments, okay?
Yeah.
The Face of the Lord is like a book wherein men read strange matters.
This looks like a guy who would get beat to death, who would order children to get beat to death by she-bears. So there's that.
A little
all right.
Old Testament Elisha humor there, Bill. Very good.
the Cutlerites, Temple Secrets in the Shadows. Alpheus Cutler was deep in Joseph Smith's inner circle.
He's in the Doctrine and Covenants.
He is.
I remember the name.
A Nauvoo High Council member, temple builder, part of the secretive Council of 50. After Joseph's death, Cutler briefly followed Brigham Young west, but peeled off by 1853, convinced that he held unique authority to carry on the church, especially the temple rites. He formed his own group, the Church of Jesus Christ, known as the Cutlerites, claiming to preserve the original Nauvoo endowment ceremony exactly as Joseph introduced it.
They're known far and wide for making money by going door to door selling cutlery.
Oh, goodness. This made them one of the only splinter groups to keep temple ordinances alive, even if quietly and privately. What made them unique? Temple focused. They performed baptisms for the dead, the full endowment in makeshift temples, usually upper rooms of homes, strict monogamy.
It's good cutlery, though.
It's sharp. Those butter knives are sharp.
I still have the first set I ever bought, and that was years ago.
Yeah. Good. Look at you. You're a Cutlerite. Strict monogamy. Unlike the Utah Church, they rejected polygamy outright. Communal living, for a time, they practiced a version of the United Order, didn't they all? Shared property managed by the church, and it's a Zion redo. They believed Joseph's church was rejected in 1844 for not finishing the Nauvoo temple, and that he reestablished it secretly among a few, including Cutler. Sadly, they didn't finish a temple either, hence the need to do the endowment ceremonies in people's homes. So, pot, meet, kettle. Their numbers were always small, maybe a few hundred at most. They eventually moved to Independence, Missouri, where they quietly continued services and temple work. As of today, the group reportedly had fewer than 10 elderly members still gathering in their own chapel, possibly performing an abridged version of the endowment. Can you imagine the halitosis in that room?
Well, the thing that's interesting. Okay, yes. Thank you. Thank you for evoking that image. The thing that's interesting to me about this is that they claim to have the original, endowment, and I wonder if they preserve that anywhere. And it talks about them having an abridged version. I don't want the abridged version. I want the full thing as Joseph Smith gave it, and I wonder if they have that in their archives. One of those 10 old people could tell me where to find it.
You have to imagine this. These guys, these 10 old guys and 10 old ladies in a room, they're still doing 92-year-olds, and they're still doing the whole thing, cutting throats, cutting guts open, swearing vows of vengeance.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's what gave it power. The thing we have now is anemic. It cannot move God to action.
So there's that.
but there's another thing in there, right? You have a picture of Mr. Cutler.
There's
the thing about the idea that Cutler had, okay, that under Zion Redux, okay, they believe Joseph's church was rejected in 1844 for not finishing the Nauvoo temple, and that he reestablished it secretly among a few, including Coulter. Now, that caught my eye because that is what Denver Snuffer teaches. He teaches the same thing. I read a number of his works. I haven't read them all, but I have read a lot. And that's one of his core principles. That is why Joseph's church was rejected, was because they didn't follow the commandment of finishing the Nauvoo temple. And then a 5-year time period gets thrown in there from somewhere as well. But regardless of how you measure it, it didn't happen. And so God rejected them as a people, and to make way for another person. Well, let me not put it so cynically. Let me say they're off on an apostasy, right? Which opens the door for another person to come in to be the true prophet.
Yeah, somebody here has the question I've got, which is Richard's asking if they're wearing onesies for undies, and I just imagine if they've got the original temple endowment, they've got to have the one piece with the flap with the 2 buttons on the back. If you really got to go, you had Taco Bell and you're just barely going to make it. You got those 2 buttons on the back, and it could be a little bit difficult. I worry. I think that
when you wear long johns with buttons on the back, you tend to take going to the bathroom a little more seriously, and you don't just start walking when you have to go. I hope this isn't getting too graphic. I mean, you need to plan these things ahead, right?
When I go into first and I feel a sudden burst, diarrhea, cha-cha-cha.
And you're not just going down the hallway, right? You're going out the door, out the back step, and far enough away from the house where it's not going to stink up the place too bad when the wind's wrong.
That's right. So with that, here is Alpheus Cutler on the left.
Yes.
And this is a Cutlerite meeting house. That guy's got big hands. My goodness.
He's a very David.
Yeah. And then the Cutlerite meeting house there on the right. And so that gives you an idea of a little bit. I went looking for pictures on all of these faiths, by the way, and I would have put a lot more photos in, but there is very little on most of them. Most of them either are so inconsequential that there isn't anything out there, or the other option is that many of these groups have a high level of secrecy and don't want much information out there. And you'll notice that when we get to the polygamist groups later, for instance.
This is where the 9 elderly people meet to do an abbreviated version of the endowment.
Yeah, this is it. Up in the upper second bedroom of that house is where the sacred holy of holies.
No stairs.
Oh boy!
And this is what I put in here, right? This was the wiki. According to Cutler, this was a bit more detail. The misdeed that brought about the rejection of Smith's church was its failure to complete the Nauvoo temple, within the sufficient time mentioned in Doctrine and Covenants, section 124, verses 31 and 32. Smith's church had accordingly ceased to exist as a legitimate entity. That was what Cutler said. And here's what Denver Snuffer wrote. And I got off his website. It's down here below. And I'm sorry that that's so small. But I think the early Salt Lake City, Denver writes, refugees. So the early Salt Lake City refugees from Nauvoo suffered through great want, difficulty, and hunger. Because of their hunger, they were boiling saddles to soften the leather enough to be able to eat it. This was very real privation and seems to represent something other than God's blessings upon them. Okay, so he's setting it up for obviously they were cursed. They weren't blessed. In the context of section 124, it is at least plausible it represented God's displeasure and not his vindication of the saints. It states, if ye labor with all your might, I will consecrate that spot that it shall be made holy. And if my people will hearken unto my voice, and unto the voice of my servants, whom I have appointed to lead my people, behold, verily I say unto you, they shall not be moved out of their place. You know, it's interesting because the saints kept getting that promise and kept getting moved out of their place. They got it in Missouri before this. I'm not sure why we're stickling at Illinois when it happened already in Missouri. But nevertheless, it's just a thought that comes to me. Did you want to say something about that, Bill?
No, I just think it's a good point you make that God in Mormonism indicates that once everybody behaves, they would all stay in one locale. And that's not what happens in Mormonism. They keep moving from place to place to place, indicating that on some level, God wasn't happy or okay or protecting them for the things that they were doing.
Yeah, the interesting thing here is, of course, that when this promise that you will stay here, you won't be moved, Zion shall not be moved out of Missouri, and they were moved and they couldn't get back, even though they tried. And Joseph Smith went to Washington, D.C. to try and petition the president and Congress for some redress unsuccessfully. And so they ended up putting down roots in Illinois, in Nauvoo, right? But it's interesting that the effort here is to make it from Illinois that they got lost, that they parted ways with the Lord, that they became apostate upon being moved out of Illinois, but not being moved out of Missouri, at least for this argument. Okay,
Yep.
so he goes on. This was the revelation given in January 1841, the one I read to you, 3.5 years before the death of Joseph and Hiram. The servants appointed were Joseph Smith and the new co-president, prophet, seer, and revelator, who was also to be ordained to the priesthood and given the sealing power by the word of God, Hiram Smith. The saints were warned that if they failed to complete the temple according to the revelation, that, quote, I will not perform the oath which I make unto you. So if you fail to complete the temple, I will not perform the oath which I make unto you, neither fulfill the promises which ye expect at my hands, saith the Lord. For instead of blessings, ye by your own works bring cursings, wrath, indignation, and judgments upon your own heads, by your follies and by all your abominations which you practice before me, saith the Lord. So this is where God and the Mormons parted ways, because they didn't get the temple completed.
I think this is interesting in that when I think of the next place they go to, Nauvoo, it is such a big deal, even in the midst of persecution.
Bill, before you even say anything else, I'm sorry, I just want to make it really clear.
Yeah.
Oh, and we need to revisit those other facts as well about Friday night. Don't forget to do that, okay? I'll write it down.
Yeah, we revisit the other facts about Friday night.
Yeah, I'm just saying what he's writing about is when they were in Illinois and getting cast out of Illinois.
Yeah. No. I'm noting that when they get to the next place, Nauvoo, when Joseph is killed and they're under so much threat and persecution, it is a big deal for them to finish the temple and try to get everybody their endowments before they move out of there. And yet, at the previous place where God put such a cursing or a withholding of blessings on them, they didn't finish it and didn't put in the extra work to get it done. And apparently either God is a liar because he kept blessing Mormonism, or we haven't quite taken what he said seriously.
Yeah, or all the deprivations that the saints suffered going west and everything that it entailed, and going out and settling in, my God, the Salt Lake Valley of all places. Yeah, trying to call that a blessing and fulfillment of the prophecy is gilding the lily to the point that Denver Snuffer's not buying it. He's saying, no, that's not a blessing. If that's a blessing, then the word has no more meaning in the English language.
Right. And the scriptures agree with him. So there's that. And then if you want to take this one too, it's up to you if you want to.
Oh, no, I absolutely do. Can I just bring up, is it
Please.
okay to bring up that thing about the facts? Because the whole thing was this, and apparently it's causing a little bit of confusion in some
Oh,
places.
yeah, please.
That here, can we just take this off for just a second?
Yep.
Okay, and then we'll get to the Hedrikites. On Monday evening, when we first talked about this email that we showed part of, that it was dated May 26th, and it was allegedly from you. It was a dummy email made out as if it were from you, and it was sent to Steve Pinecker, pretending to be you, right? Now, there have been things that have been going on for a while, but what had happened was this. It was like, I think what you said was you thought that a month ago was when the stuff happened that was actually back in November or so, and that was when there was the whole kerfuffle with the video that Dives had put out about Steve Pinecker and his mom in the hurricane, right? I think that happened back in November.
When I saw this just a couple of days ago, again, Pinecker meant for me to see this earlier, a month earlier. I didn't. And when he followed up sending me something else, and you'll see what that was when we get to Friday night, I then saw this, and I assumed this went back to when he was making fun of Pinecker and Pinecker's mom, Dives. And that wasn't the case. So I reported it that way when I was talking on Mormonism After Dark, but factually, this was a month ago.
Yeah, this is just a month ago.
That when Pinecker had Jim Bennett on his podcast to talk about that moment in time from 6 months ago. So that
was after Jim Bennett was on Dives' podcast, which got Steve Pinecker upset.
Yeah, and I know
all that stuff that was going on in the mix of this particular email, but we'll set out a full chronology on Friday night.
Was Jim Bennett on Pinecker's podcast before or after Dives?
After, pretty sure.
Okay.
That's what got Pinecker upset.
But they were close to the same time, right? He goes on Dives and then he goes on Pinecker's a week or two later or something.
Maybe even shorter than that.
Okay. And yeah, we'll go through all of that. So I was mistaken on the Mormonism After Dark episode about the timing of this email, or because Pinecker sent me this. I didn't catch it when he sent it to me in a text message. And when he followed up the next time with something else that he sent me, I then saw what he sent me and saw this and thought it was all one and the same and couldn't make sense of it until this whole thing is unfolded, which again, Friday night will unfold it for you too.
And we'll have several witnesses present, including Colby Reddish and Cultural Hall should be here, perhaps Steve Pinecker as well.
Yep. And so we'll be able to talk about this whole event as it transpired. And by the end, I think you'll make as much sense out of it as we've been able to.
Yeah, like I say, my favorite movie is Casablanca. One of the many famous lines in it is, round up the usual suspects. Well, here it's a little different. Here it's round up the usual suspect. But further than that, your affiant saith not.
All right.
Oh, Hedrikites.
You've got
Hedrikites, my kingdom for a Hedrikite. The Temple Lot Church, guardians of Zion's front lawn. Oh, these are the guys. They got the Temple Lot. The Church of Christ Temple Lot is one of the oldest and most quietly persistent LDS offshoots. Founded in 1863 in the middle of the Civil War by Granville Hedrick, this group didn't follow Brigham West or Joseph Smith III into RLDS leadership. Instead, Hedrick claimed God called him to redeem Zion, literally, by relocating to Independence, Missouri, the site Joseph Smith had dedicated for a future temple. Somebody had the idea, or God directed somebody to go back there, right? All the fighting's over. You can go back there and maybe get some real estate for a good price. In 1867, the Hedrickites pulled off something big. They got the deed to the original temple lot. Wahoo! That tiny patch of grass in Missouri became their spiritual center, and their whole identity revolves around it. They even tried to build a temple there in the 1920s, dug a foundation, but never completed it. What they believe, they follow early LDS teachings, Bible plus Book of Mormon only, no polygamy, no baptisms for the dead, no celestial marriage. Worship is simple, no temple rites, just preaching and spiritual gifts like healing. I hope they have more luck than the Mormons do. They originally had no prophet president, just a council of 12 apostles. Well, that was true with the LDS Church, right? The Brigham Church.
Right.
They've since added a first presidency, but still emphasized shared leadership. They see Joseph Smith as inspired until he wasn't. Later doctrines like the endowment or plural marriage, to them, that's where Joseph went off the tracks. So they proudly called themselves primitive Mormons, the stripped down, back to basics version of the Restoration. Where they are now, the Temple Lot Church still exists, headquartered on the same land Joseph Smith once dedicated. Their small white chapel sits quietly on the corner. They've got a few hundred active members, some surprising growth in Tonga and Tahiti, and a global membership that might reach a few thousand on a good day. Why it matters? This group may be small, but they're the literal caretakers of Mormon prophecy real estate. Their claim is simple. We have the land and we've stayed pure. No new doctrines, no Utah flair, no community of Christ drift. If Christ ever does return to independence for that temple Joseph predicted, the Temple Lot Church will be able to say, we've been keeping the lawn mowed. And one does wonder, doesn't one, Bill, the size of the offers that they must have turned down from the LDS Church?
You would imagine the church would like to have that piece of land, wouldn't they?
Oh, yeah.
When they're focusing on that piece of land makes perfect sense. It's really their only inroad to a truth claim. Anything else is just not going to hold up well. But claiming you have that land, any generation, so the next generation of Hedrikites born to Hedrikite parents, you really get to feel like you're in the one true church because you've got the proper temple lot where that's been blessed, that's been set apart for Jesus to return to. So I think that's interesting. And by the way, when you read the part, they originally had no prophet president, just a council of 12 apostles. And you said, just like the LDS faith, I imagine there would be some people out there who go, no, we've always had a prophet president. No, when Joseph Smith was killed, Brigham Young took leadership of the church, but stayed in the quorum of the 12. And it was a lot of years.
3.5, the interregnum, till December of 1847.
And that happened to be true, I think, for the next two presidents after that as well, who didn't take the reins of the church as president of the church until some amount of time passed.
Years.
Before doing so, yes.
Months and months and even years in some cases.
Yep. So
until Jesus showed up to Lorenzo Snow in the Salt Lake Temple and said, do it now. Yeah. No more of this dilly-dallying. I have come to you from the royal courts of glory with an important message, and that is quit delaying the reorganization of the first presidency, okay?
Get it done. And I'll just note there that you were accurate when you said that in case anybody was having any doubts there about
the winter's quarters.
Yeah.
Sorry to throw that out there.
Winter's quarters.
Yes, and that was where Wilford Woodruff, who was present for the reorganization, there was a lot of politics going on. I don't remember all of it. But later on, like a couple of years later, I think it's Orson Hyde in General Conference in retelling the story. Now miracles start getting added to it. This becomes a miracle fill. There's at least two main miracles that are associated with the story of Brigham Young being made the president of the church and the first presidency reorganized. Once again, at Winter's Quarters, over there in, where's that, by Omaha today, Bill? I think it is. The jumping off point for the 111-day trek to the Salt Lake Valley.
It's like Nebraska and somewhere else or something, right? And
yeah, it's right. Yeah. Well, there's a river there. Anyway, regardless, okay. So that's where he is. And the miracles that come up are, I think the first one is that there was an earthquake. There's an earthquake in the camp, and everybody comes running to the house where it is that this had happened. And that's how they knew it was from God. Of course, I did an episode on this like 8 years ago. And I remember saying, that's funny because I would think that if you've got a camp full of people and an earthquake happens, you wouldn't all have them running to the same place. Like you would know exactly where it came from. That struck me as strange and perhaps unbelievable. However, the second one was that God's voice was heard. Ordain my servant Brigham Young to be the president. And that one got added to. So as soon as someone says that kind of crazy stuff in conference, it gets repeated, and then it becomes a historical fact. And that's how history is made in the Mormon church.
Yeah, and as well as all the faith-promoting miracles. So, okay, there is Granville Hedrick on the left. He also came up with some revelatory documents. He's got the spiritual wife system, the truth teller. These were documented, and by revelation, I'm not sure I mean that. I think these are criticisms of the LDS Church and why they have a right to their truth claims and why they can preach that the Brighamite faction had gone astray. Hedrick's tombstone there in the top right corner.
Is that on the temple lot?
I don't know that.
That's where I'd want to be buried if I were he.
You know, that's right. If Jesus
might
comes
be
back,
against the law.
You might be in the first resurrection. So, you know, Jesus wouldn't have to go far.
Just be buried under where the temple's going to be, like they do over there in Jolly Old.
Yeah, and I just want to note their meeting house, quite pretty. There's the white meeting house of theirs down below. And so you can see that. And with that, we'll move on here. So now the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Is this me?
No wonder. No, I think this one's me. No wonder they changed it to the Community of Christ. While most of Mormonism followed Brigham Young west to Utah, a second major tradition stayed behind. Rooted not in geography, but in family. These were the Josephites. Latter-day Saints who believed that prophetic authority should stay within Joseph Smith's bloodline, not be handed off to apostles. By the way, I'll just note, this happens in every religion. It happens with the Moonies. When some young Moon dies, there is a debate of whether his family takes over or whether some of his high-up followers take over. In the Islamic faith, the Sunnis and the Shiites is the difference between family and high-up ranking followers. And so whenever a high-demand fundamentalist religious leader passes away, there's almost always a debate about who's in charge next. And more often than not, it's the family on one side saying they should be in charge, and the high-ranking non-family leaders on the other side saying it's actually supposed to be them. So I'll just note that as just a little side note. These were the Josephites. It should stay within Joseph Smith's bloodline, not be handed off to apostles. In 1860, that belief became reality when Joseph Smith III, the prophet's eldest son, took leadership of a reorganized church. So much for the restoration only once. Formerly named the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or RLDS.
What we used to do about the scripture argument against them was, and that name was the fact that in the Doctrine and Covenants, the name that the Lord commands his church to be called is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not the Reorganized Church. See, God really cares about these things. At least the apologists do. I know I did when I was in my 20s.
Yeah, but you don't get apologists wanting to swear by the scriptures anymore because there's too many loopholes and too many abandoned things. So probably doesn't hold as much weight as it used to. So they formally named the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or RLDS, with his mother Emma and other early leaders at his side. Joseph III led the RLDS Church as a non-polygamous, non-theocratic alternative to the Utah branch. For many saints in the Midwest, this was the true continuation of the restoration, not a new church, but the legitimate inheritance of Joseph Smith's vision. The RLDS Church. Now, again, too, because polygamy was kept secret by Joseph Smith, it would be possible to be in the church in Nauvoo and sort of raise an eyebrow at Brigham Young and the other saints, early leaders practicing polygamy. And it would be possible for you to go, I don't think Joseph was doing that. And that would lead you to thinking that the Brighamite sect had gone astray, and that that would give credibility then to Joseph Smith III taking leadership, but also staying as far away from polygamy as he could, and claiming, which again, the monogamy affirmers, polygamy deniers strap their saddle to, which is that Joseph Smith III and Emma swear that Joseph Smith is not doing polygamy, and that's a Brigham Young and other leaders of the LDS Church thing going on. So I'll just note that. Okay. The RLDS Church rejected polygamy, temple ordinances, and the priesthood hierarchy introduced in Nauvoo, insisting those were later distortions. They kept the Book of Mormon, but leaned more toward mainstream Christian theology, especially over time. In 2001, They renamed themselves the Community of Christ. Thank goodness they shortened the name instead of requiring people to say the longer name, reflecting that shift. Today they are inclusive, progressive, openly ecumenical, ordaining women, embracing LGBTQ members, and emphasizing peace and justice over exclusive truth claims. But not everyone followed that path. As the LDS Church modernized, conservative members pushed back. The ordination of women in 1984 and the end of the Smith family leadership in the 1990s triggered other schisms. Out of the tension came a new wave of offshoots, the Restoration Church and the Remnant Church, which we won't spend time on tonight, but I think it is interesting that they've had their own breakoffs, just like you pointed to Denver Snuffer earlier. The Restoration Church and the Remnant Church, both claiming to preserve the original RLDS faith, complete with male-only priesthood, Zion-building theology, and leadership by Joseph Smith's literal descendants. I can tell you who was really interested in getting behind this movement. It was the genealogy family descendants of the Smith family. They would love it if the church moved away from the Smith family. It would be the time to raise your hand and go, yeah, but I'm a Smith family. I'd like to be a leader.
I think Emma may have seen her son as a way to redeem the memory of her husband.
Yeah, and maybe they're still trying to do a little bit of that today. So while the Brighamite tradition splintered over polygamy and prophetic succession, the Josephite line fractured over modernization versus tradition. And just like their Utah cousins, each branch still claims to be the one carrying forward the true restoration. I'll just note here in the images, Community of Christ logo, there is the, I'm trying to remember what that was, but the top left-hand corner, I don't remember what that is off the top of my head. Top right-hand is their temple. It's the only temple I think they have. It's got the spiral. Anybody's welcome there. Bottom left, all of those photos are Joseph Smith III. So you can see him as a young boy there, the second from the left. And then the first from the left, a little older, and then a few of them as he got into his 50s, 60s, 70s. I don't remember how old he was when he died, but that's a pretty old guy there on the far right. And then on the bottom right is Stephen Veazey, I think is his name. He is the current leader of the church. And then they've already announced that next in line is Stacy Cram, who will be the first female president prophet in the Mormon tradition, if she, in fact, does take over leadership. I think there's still some final discussion about that, but it looks like she's on her way to that.
I think Tim Rathbone had said, when you said that before, that there are some others in other probably offshoots that may be very small, but that have had a woman as the prophet president before this. I think I remember reading him saying that.
I love that. I love hearing that. I did not know that, so that's really good.
Out of the major, maybe the major offshoots, we could say that. I don't know. The top three.
Yep. The next one we're going to jump into is the Polygamy Fundamentalists.
Yes, but there's more.
Yeah, and there's a lot more. So we need to set the table for this.
With cutlery. Let's set the table with cutlery, Bill.
So I'll let you take this one.
Mormon fundamentalism, the hidden continuation of the principle. When the LDS Church publicly renounced polygamy in the late 1800s and early 1900s, first with the 1890 Manifesto, then the more forceful Second Manifesto in 1904, it told the U.S. government and the world that plural marriage was over. But behind the scenes, it wasn't quite that simple. Church leaders continued to quietly authorize plural marriages in secret, especially in Mexico and Canada, sending trusted men, often under the radar, to keep the principle of plural marriage alive. These early fundamentalists weren't defiant rogues. Beware all rogues. But they weren't defiant rogues. They were loyal Latter-day Saints in an undercover mission, carrying out what they believed were the ongoing instructions of God's prophet. For years, these underground sealings and marriages were unofficial, but still sanctioned. Leaders like Lauren Woolley, note the last name, later claimed to have been directly commissioned by high-ranking apostles to continue plural marriage, long after it was publicly banned. The understanding was keep the principle alive until the church can bring it back. But that moment never came. Instead, the LDS Church distanced itself more and more from its polygamist past. Those sent out to preserve it were gradually cut off, disavowed, and eventually excommunicated. To the fundamentalists, it felt like betrayal, abandoned by the very church that had once commanded them to obey at all costs, and punished by the church for keeping polygamy alive as the church had commanded them to do. That's the origin of Mormon fundamentalism, not rebellion, but obedience. They didn't start out trying to break away. They believed they were the ones staying faithful, while the church capitulated to the world. From that foundation came a web of splinter groups, some still quietly practicing plural marriage in rural communities, others spiraling into extreme control, violence, and cult-like isolation. But nearly all trace their priesthood authority back to that early moment when the LDS Church, desperate for statehood and survival, went public with one story and private with another.
I just want to know, we should stop here for just a second, because I think when you and I were in the church, I'll speak for myself, the perception I was given as a convert in Ohio was that polygamists were these bad people who, and again, some of them are, and we'll get to those, and I will heap on all accountability and condemnation for the bad behavior of Mormon fundamentalists, both in abuse of women and violence, including murder. But in those early moments, they were loyal, humble Latter-day Saints who were asked by the church to, like, hey, we've got to end it. Government's on our ass about it. We've got to stop doing polygamy, but we don't want to, and we're not supposed to. And Jesus Christ came to John Taylor in '86 and said, don't get anywhere away from it. So the way that we're going to do the workaround is we're going to tell the government we're ending it, and we're going to send all of you folks that we've called especially to keep this going, no matter what we say or do not believe it. Keep polygamy going. And so rather than being bad people, all of us coming out of the LDS tradition or in the LDS tradition ought to recognize that the LDS Church abandoned these people, gave them a command, sent them on their way, told them to keep it going at all costs. And then little by little, as you pointed out, RFM in there, walked away from them, and they had no choice but to do what they were told to do, which is don't believe the LDS Church no matter what they say. Keep this principle going.
It suddenly occurs to me for the first time that what you're talking about here, Bill, may be one of the primary motivations for the church excommunicating D. Michael Quinn for publishing his paper about post-manifesto polygamy. Not just that they were lying about it, but that it showed how they had treated the polygamous sects.
Yeah. The church doesn't like uncomfortable facts and details, that's for sure. Again, condemn the ones who go too far, but we ought to have some compassion, and if I can say pity, for the folks that were abandoned by the church because they really were doing what earlier leaders commanded them to do at all costs. And they can't figure out, from their point of view, the LDS Church apostatized from what it said it was going to do, and it just stranded them. It just left them hanging.
It was the Mormon Bay of Pigs.
It was the Mormon Bay of Pigs. All right. So they started. So there's the Council of Friends. There's the Priesthood Council, the original fundamentalist line. Now, is Lauren Woolley the son or the dad? Do you remember offhand?
No, I don't, actually.
Okay. I'm trying to remember this offhand, but one of the Woolleys, the father Woolley, was present in a home where where John Taylor was housed up hiding from the law, who was trying to catch him doing polygamy, and he's in hiding. And while he's in hiding, this is when this 1886 revelation occurs. And if you go look it up, we've done episodes on this in the past. I don't think most
Lauren is the son. John W. Woolley is the father.
Lauren is the son. John is the they say that again.
Lauren is the son.
Yep.
John is the father.
Okay, so John Woolley. So the 1886 revelation by John Taylor. There isn't anyone really arguing this. Even the Latter-day Saint faction of the church, its apologists admit that this is almost certainly a legitimate revelation given to John Taylor. It's never canonized. It's never accepted by the church. It sits on John Taylor's desk when he dies. His son, John W. Taylor, finds it, secures it. He intimates in his disciplinary court about it. Other apostles note that they also knew it existed, and Joseph Fielding Smith admitted to putting a copy of it into the church historian's storage or vault or wherever he put it. He had a lot of things in that vault. This might have been one of them. I say all that to say that John Woolley claims that he's there when this 1886 visitation occurs, and he says that Jesus Christ and Joseph Smith visit with John Taylor and command him to keep polygamy going at all costs, which is essentially the message of the 1886 revelation that we have the text of. And in the 1920s, Lauren C. Woolley, John Woolley's son, begins to organize these group of folks, because up until that point, they are part of the LDS Church, just practicing polygamy in secret under the command of the LDS Church. But over time, little by little, they're abandoned. And in the 1920s, they sort of sense like we've been completely abandoned. There's no going back. So we need to figure out how we're going to move forward. And they move forward by creating a council of friends, a priesthood council. Woolley claimed a separate priesthood authority outside of the LDS Church to continue the principle. If you talk to some of the fundamentalists, they'll talk about there's the church and there's the priesthood, and those two things are separate. And the church continues to get to be the church, but it no longer has the priesthood, and it's the fundamentalist groups that have that.
And I think that's one of the reasons that the LDS Church stresses keys over and over and over in their public pronouncements, where most of us go, this is boring and I don't really care. But I think it's important to them because they see the fundamentalists as violating the principle of the priesthood keys by doing this.
And somebody's asking,
I'm sorry, Bill.
Please.
Priesthood keys being defined in the LDS Church as the authority to say who can be ordained and who's going to be baptized. But here, who can be ordained to the priesthood? You can't just be ordaining someone to the priesthood without the church's sanction. That's what keys are.
Yes. And somebody asked if Spencer Woolley Kimball was related to the Woolleys. Mm-hmm. Yes, he was. Which also plays into it. Again, won't get into that tonight, but there's family blood in some of this abandonment and some of the statements that were made that some would see as offensive coming from your distant cousin who threw you under the bus. All right, significance. The council became the foundational body for most later fundamentalist groups, often referred to simply as the work. And notable figures in this early organization were Lauren C. Woolley, J. Leslie Broadbent, John Barlow, Joseph Musser, and Rulon Allred.
That's a familiar name. Joseph Musser wrote a lot of books, but Rulon Allred is the more famous one.
Yep. And I'll let you take this if you want.
Mormon fundamentalist groups trace their origins to the LDS Church's 1890 public renunciation of polygamy, a decision many saw as political rather than revelatory. While the church moved to formally ban plural marriage in 1904, some members believed they were still divinely obligated to practice the principle. In the 1920s, Lauren C. Woolley claimed to have been set apart by earlier church leaders to preserve plural marriage through a separate priesthood line. This became the foundation for nearly all modern fundamentalist groups. So this is how they have the priesthood in order to seal plural marriages, plural brides. From Woolley's Council of Friends emerged several distinct factions. The Apostolic United Brethren, the AUB, the FLDS, the Centennial Park Group, and the Third Ward. So the AUB or Allred group broke off in the 1950s under Rulon Allred after succession disputes. They maintain a more moderate stance and view the LDS Church as still legitimate, though apostate. The FLDS Church formed around the Short Creek community. That's the fundamentalist LDS Church. Formed around the Short Creek community and later centralized under Rulon and Jeffrey and Warren Jeffs. Their defining belief in the one-man doctrine sparked a major split in the 1980s. And the one-man doctrine is going to be going along with what it says in section 132, is that there's only one man on earth at any one time who has the power, the sealing power, right? As opposed to multiple people having it, like do in the LDS Church today, because it's been delegated, right? So that's how we get around that scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants, delegation. The Centennial Park Group, or Second Ward, formed after that split when council members Marion Hammond and Alma Timpson were cast out for rejecting the one-man doctrine. They adopted a more council-based leadership model. And the Third Ward emerged in the 1990s after further disagreements within Centennial Park, led by Frank Naylor and Ivan Nielsen. See, it's wonderful to see all this discontent going on among God's children. This is a view. If we could go back in 2,000 years, what we're seeing is the first 2 centuries of Christianity, and in large measure, the first 2 centuries probably of any world religion. All of these highly predictable, given the history of things, right? Highly predictable offshoots that are going to break here, break there. They're going to break over this. One will have a lineage, right? Lineage is very important. Look at 2 Nephi chapter 3, where it appears that Joseph of old has a special lineage, and through that lineage, Joseph Smith would come. One could imagine that if it went that far, it would continue on beyond that. Mormonism, the LDS Church, adopted a related doctrine, which was that the lineage had to be not for the prophet, but for the patriarch. And the patriarch had to be a lineal descent until it wasn't anymore. Well, actually, it was just discontinued. It was never not a Smith in the general patriarch of the church, I believe. And it was discontinued with, who was Eldred G. Smith. He was retired, never replaced. Retired in the late 70s, I think. Never replaced, passed away, and there goes a position in the church that, according to the Doctrine and Covenants, was at least equal with the president and prophet, and maybe a little above. Let's see. Oh, and with that, by the way, the apostolic coup de grace was complete. Other groups branched off along separate lines. The LeBaron family's church of the Firstborn was established in Mexico, known for violent power struggles and prophetic claims. The True and Living Church, TLC, in Manti, Utah, broke from the LDS Church itself, emphasizing millennialism and new revelations.
All right, so on the left there is the book or pamphlet that was written about the 1886 visitation of Joseph Smith and Jesus Christ to John Taylor. That was written by Lynn Bishop. There is also in the middle there the reminiscences of John Woolley and Lauren C. Woolley. And that is, I believe, Lauren C. Woolley there on the right.
It is. And it was in that picture, too. You see him, he's shaking hands right there with Jesus and Joseph.
Yeah, that would be John there. And I think Lauren on
John
the right.
Taylor.
Oh, yeah, John Taylor. Correct.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's John Taylor as reminisced by.
Yes.
The Woolies.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, and so in the book you see John Woolley there on the left in the oval inside on the cover of the book, and he would be the one who claims he was actually present when Jesus Christ. He could see the room light up in a mystical way. He could hear the voices of multiple people in the room talking, even though he knew only in physical nature John Taylor was the only person in that room. So you can see John Woolley's picture there on the book, and then Lauren Woolley on the right, which is the same guy you see on the photo on the right, except he's missing his beard in that photo. And then
I don't see why anybody who believes in the first vision wouldn't believe in that particular vision too.
Yeah, and in fact, this would have more witnesses to it than the first vision would have. And
well, you only need more than one.
So this actually there would be more evidence for the 1886 visitation of John Taylor than there would be for Joseph Smith's first vision.
Each of those 4 primary accounts from Joseph Smith, even though they contradict each other, they don't count as 4 different people.
Right. And I just want to say thank you, Michael. $100 super chat. Hello,
wow,
my friends.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. I probably should say here, since we're getting close, we're probably a little more than halfway. we're definitely a little more than halfway time-wise. I'll just note to folks, we really do survive on donations. And if you could go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, send us something small, $5, $10 a month. If you can do more, great. The donations for the podcast, whether it's this podcast or the entity as a whole, those fluctuate up and down. And we constantly need new people to come on board and to be supporters of the program. If you like the history that we share, if you like the perspectives that we put up, if you like the fact that we document everything, that we try really hard to pose the history to you in a way that follows the most rational lines of thought, that demonstrates the points we make with actual accounts in history to substantiate it, please support the program. Go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, send us a few bucks. We are really appreciative of it. If you want to do the super chats, you're more than welcome to. Please know that those are a gift, not a donation. YouTube does keep a portion of that.
And so it's a big portion too, isn't it, Bill?
30%. So if you want to get
SOBs.
So if you want to get more to Radio Free Mormon, to Mormonism Live, to the Mormon discussion, please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, and send the money there. But we do appreciate the super chats, and thank you.
Too late for you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you, though, so much. Mwah.
Thank you. All right. Also, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, Richard, for that. The Apostolic United Brethren, the AUB, also called the All Red Group, is one of the largest fundamentalist sects and is far more moderate than the FLDS. Members live openly in society, often dress modern, and generally reject underage marriage. Good on them.
Generally.
Leadership is shared among a priesthood council, and many AUB members hope for eventual reconciliation with the LDS Church if it ever restores plural marriage. In other words, they agree that LDS Mormonism, for the most part, is where they want to be. They just want to make sure it has plural marriage. So LDS Church, if you're looking to take a few new members on, now you know the path. Thank you, Lulu Baru, $2. Never mow, but I really enjoy your content. Thank you so much. The Apostolic United Brethren is a Mormon fundamentalist group that practices polygamy and has places of worship in Mexico and several U.S. states. Members typically refer to it as the work, again, same phrases, the priesthood or the group, rather than by its formal name or as a church, often called the All Red Group. We already noted that. By outsiders, the AUB uniquely acknowledges the LDS Church as a legitimate, though spiritually compromised, divine institution, setting it apart from most other fundamentalist sects. The Apostolic United Brethren, they split from the Council of Friends. They were founded by Rulon Allred in the 1950s. They had disagreement. Why they split? They had disagreement over authority and succession after Joseph Musser's death in 1954. Musser had appointed Allred to leadership, but others in the council rejected that.
Joseph Smith appointed his son, Joseph Smith III, to leadership, but others rejected that.
Right. So you can see these patterns show up over and over and over again. They're more progressive than other groups, more accepting of outside education, somewhat more democratic. They operate relatively open with temples and worship spaces in Mexico and the U.S. Sometimes you hear of fundamentalist Mormons who actually pretend to be LDS so that they can get through the temple and get the endowment. Not always, but sometimes this is members of the AUB.
And then they sneak off into a ceiling room.
Yeah, and take
nobody's
care of
looking.
And then they do that thing, and then it's time and all eternity.
Yep.
Views the LDS Church as legitimate, just apostate.
Were you doing nanu? Is that what you were doing?
It was something. You know what I was doing, RFM.
Nanu.
All right. I'll just note, I believe that's Rulon Allred on the left. And we interviewed Cody Brown, maybe a year and a half ago now at this point. And he and his wives make up the TV show Sister Wives. They're no longer married. I don't think he's married to maybe any of them. And if anyone, just one.
The three on the left are gone, and the one on the right may still be hanging in there by a thread. I don't know. I don't follow this at all. All I know is what I hear.
But I will note the Sister Wives and Cody Brown, that TV show is based. They are the Apostolic United Brethren, although I don't think many, if maybe not all of, let me say it differently. Few of them, if any of them, are members of the AUB anymore, as far as I know.
I had a fun time talking with Cody.
Cody, yes.
Colby, I can't stand. Cody was fun.
We'll see Kobe on Friday. So there's that.
My gosh.
By the way, Michael gave another one. I'm a monthly donor as well. RFM. This one is for you. Not sure Bill shares. Bill shares plenty.
Oh my gosh.
So just FYI.
Michael, you are right. I appreciate the sentiment. All of you who want Bill to share more with RFM, please say so in the chat.
Please say so. By the uplifted, all those who wish that to be true, please manifest it by the uplifted hand. Anyway, so
Cody Brown is not some rando.
No, Cody Brown.
Continue the riff.
No. So there's that. Okay, I will turn the time over to you for the FLDS.
You're going to give me Warren Jeffs. Thanks a lot, pal.
Okay, you're welcome.
The Warren Jeffs cult-like kingdom. Cult-like?
You
as F kingdom. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS, is the most infamous sect based in Short Creek on the Utah-Arizona border. The group followed a one-man rule prophet model. And you know, as bad as this may be, it's only going to get worse with a one-man rule prophet model. Under Warren Jeffs, things went dark. Child brides, total control, apocalyptic teachings, even after Jeffs was imprisoned for child sexual abuse and denying that he was a prophet. His followers still treat him as the prophet, taking orders via revelations from his prison cell. The community has splintered, but still exists in secretive pockets.
You think that Wendy Nelson, sitting on the edge of her bed with her notepad, or David Bednar's wife, Susan, getting her notepad out to take notes,
or the water bottle,
as the voice of God emanates from the lips of prophets, seers, and revelators in the LDS Church.
Yes.
You should see the FLDS Church where Warren Jeffs makes phone calls from prison and the women all huddle up around the phone to write down what it is that the prophet Jeffs is recounting.
They look like laurels at General Conference.
It looks like laurels.
I know, we don't have laurels anymore. Sorry.
They're gone.
Just like all the rest of the rest are we missing that one? I don't think so. We have the Kingston group, don't we?
I think they're in here. I think maybe they're later on, but I could be wrong. We'll find out. So that's
Gali Sinatra's kind way of hoping that we're done.
Yeah, we're getting close. Maybe. So the FLDS, I'll just note, split from the Council of Friends, officially formed in the 1990s, but its roots trace back to the Short Creek community in the 1930s.
Nobody likes this Council of Friends.
No, they're not very friendly. They break off a lot. That's true, RFM. They originated in the 1930s and 40s. In the early 1980s, leader Leroy Johnson pushed the one-man doctrine, declaring that only one man on earth at a time held the keys of sealing power. The doctrine caused a major schism in 1984. Johnson excommunicated council members Marion Hammond and Elma Timpson for resisting it when they just went and started their own church. Rulon Jeffs, then his son Warren Jeffs, who centralized control and became a near theocratic dictator, and pretty much a theocratic dictator, known for extreme control over members, arranged marriages, and criminal charges against Warren Jeffs for the like. Everybody knows this group. They might be the most well-known because I think people could pick out Warren Jeffs before they could pick out President Nelson. So President Nelson, you've got to do a little better. Out in the world, I mean. I think people would recognize Jeffs before they would recognize Russell M. Nelson.
Maybe so President Nelson isn't getting enough FaceTime.
He's not. Don't expect much soon. All right. So in the bottom left, Warren Jeffs being taken in or out of the courtroom. In the top right, folks may remember this. The federal government on accusations of abuse went and took all of these children, put them into government custody in terms of their welfare.
In Texas.
The FLDS threw a huge fit, and it became sort of an embarrassment to the government that they handled it the way they did, and the children were returned to the FLDS parents. And
well, especially when this call was later found out to have been manufactured, if memory serves.
Yeah. And then in the bottom right, all of the women that claim to be the wives of Warren Jeffs at that moment. this guy was just gross. He was having sex with his own children, very young kids, boys and girls.
His own children,
Mhm.
Bill?
Yep. That's in several of the documentaries. Those children report being raped and molested by their dad.
I'm
But
so
again,
sorry, because part
yeah,
of me thinks that's worse, and then the other part of me is thinking, and why is that so much worse? Well, I guess because it is. That's how I feel.
yeah,
Everything's horrible here. That just sounds
everything is
even
horrible.
worse.
Yep. This was the Warren Jeff's estate that was in the middle of construction when he got arrested. It's been finished. As far as I know, it's a hotel today, I think. I think that's what it's being used as.
You know where it's located?
This is in Colorado City, here in southern Utah, just across the Arizona border. On the other side of the border is Hilldale and Centennial Park, where other fundamentalist polygamist practicing Mormons are, but of different groups. And so Hilldale in Colorado City specifically is where the FLDS group resides, and it's just across the Utah border in Arizona. But he was in the middle of building this when he was arrested and put into jail. I assume the building on the left is their church. The building on the right is their temple. My friend here, Chris Bloxam, did go into that temple. He can vouch for some of the claims. Lindsay Hansen Park has also been in there.
Yeah. Which claims?
That in their temple was in the ceiling room was an altar that unfolded into a bed, and Warren Jeffs would manipulate the women into orgies and all kinds of crazy things that happened in that temple. And some of those stories that come out of that building are atrocious and horrific. And they're out there. Folks want to chase those down, but we're not going to be sharing those tonight. But it was, there was a lot of abuse that occurred at the hands of Warren Jeffs. There's another picture of that temple.
Looks like a castle.
Welcome to the house of the Lord.
No steeple envy there.
Yeah. And I'll read this one and I'll let you have the next one. So Centennial Park, the Nice Neighbors, one of their leaders I'll talk about here in a moment is Arthur Hammond. And I'll share that in a second. But splitting from the FLDS in the 1980s, the Centennial Park group aimed to preserve plural marriage without authoritarian control. They're sometimes called the Second Ward of Short Creek. Members live in regular neighborhoods. Some members send kids to public school and even host a community Christmas musical, still polygamist, but with less prairie dresses and no prison profits. Again, we've just noted most of this already. They rejected the one-man doctrine just south of Colorado City, Arizona, in a separate town called Centennial Park, more moderate, family-friendly compared to the FLDS. Some openness to mainstream society.
You know, if Cardin Ellis ever started practicing plural marriage, he could call himself the Second Ward Radio.
Yes, he could. In the top right was another TV show, Polygamy USA. That is Arthur Hammond in the middle. Between
Same guy in both?
wives. What's that?
Same guy in both?
No. Bottom left family is a different leadership family in the Centennial Park. Upper right is Arthur Hammond. He would come into the family pawn shop all the time. And him and I would have conversations around Mormon history. He would try to convince me of his view. I tried to convince him of mine. Both of us talked to each other very respectfully. I would consider him a friend. Had dinner at his home on an occasion. He invited me and my family, invited Chris Bloxam and his family, and we all went over there for a really beautiful meal. The daughters in his family, I can't speak for the entire faith, but the way it sounded, and it definitely was true with his daughters had a lot of autonomy. They had a lot of say over who they would marry. They were the ones who led picking out people to date. And if a proposal was to happen, they were to give like their approval of that relationship before the boy could manipulate the girl.
But still all within the framework of this community, right?
Yes, it's still polygamy, but the women are in charge in a lot of respects, wherein
they're in charge of the women are in charge of their captivity.
Yes, to some degree, yes. And they were very educated, very intelligent, very articulate in conversation. And I actually had a really incredible experience having dinner with them. And they are different, at least enough different that I would want to be careful.
What do you mean
about
they're different, Bill?
Well, I wouldn't want to lump them in the same group as the FLDS.
Oh, better different,
They're better different.
not worse different.
Yeah, I still don't like a lot of what they do, but they're not Warren Jeffs, and they're not doing things that way. And there's a lot more democracy, a lot more valuing of education, and there's a lot more female autonomy compared to the FLDS group. So I'll just note that. These are other families. So again, a lot of them wear modern clothing. Bottom right-hand side is another one. Centennial Park Group. There was a documentary, I think, out there. Maybe it was a book. I'm not sure, but Polygamy on the Other Side of the Hill. So folks can look that up if they want to know more.
No, I thought if you go back there again, this picture, which I understand is very prevalent in Mormon fundamentalist homes, before that one or after that one, the one with the guy sit there, you go with the picture up on the wall. And that's sort of like, I think, the line of authority, because you start in the upper left: Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff. Weird person. Wait a second. That's not Lorenzo Snow. That's supposed to be Lorenzo Snow, but I'll bet it's Lauren Woolley.
Yeah, Lauren, or
And
probably
then-
John Woolley, and then
Or
Lauren.
John Woolley and maybe Lauren.
Yep.
Yeah, and then you go boom, 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 boom. And I think the guy in the bottom right is either the guy that this fellow's sitting got it from, or that's himself.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
So there's
probably the guy he got it from.
Yeah, you can never have enough prophets, seers, and revelators upon the earth. Everyone gets a key. And with that, I'll let you move on to the LeBarons.
Okay. Well, I've got a brand new roller skate if you got a brand new key. Brand new pair of roller skates. Excuse me. The LeBarons, murder in the name of God. Oh, geez, the LeBarons. Bad mojo, these guys. In the 1970s, the LeBaron family turned Mormon fundamentalism into a tragic saga of violence. Joel LeBaron founded the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Times, but his brother Ervil, which uncoincidentally sounds a lot like evil, declared himself prophet, murdered Joel, and ran a doomsday cult called the Church of the Lamb of the Doomsday Cult. Church of the Lamb of God that assassinated rivals, including the AUB's leader, those nice guys that we just talked about. The LeBaron groups have mostly faded, but their story remains a chilling cautionary tale. The socio-political structure of LeBaron is based on the codes of behavior established in the Apostolic United Brethren. In 1955, remember, Joel LeBaron received a revelation. A lot of stuff was going on in the mid-1950s with regard to offshoots here, that he should build a new church. This news dismayed many members of the LeBaron community who had formed an alliance with the AUB. And you can block anything you want for a $100 donation, Michael. Who had formed an alliance with the AUB under the leadership of its prophet, Rulon C. Allred.
This is Michael's third $100 of the night. So there you go. Bill, you seem very generous. I was just messing around. No offense taken. No offense taken. RFM is welcome to say whatever he wants to say about this, but somebody suggested that I treat you like a partner. I think I do.
Yeah.
I think
is something going crazy in the chat or something now?
I think some folks wonder how things work between you and me, and maybe they have assumptions about things. But Michael was just noting that he was just messing around. No offense taken.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
Michael.
No offense taken.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So, all right, there's that. So there's the LeBarons. Don't have any pictures of them. There's the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Time.
If you did, you'd be dead.
Yeah, so this is again the same institution. Now we're just noting some of the things here. So early polygamous lines, but not directly tied to Woolley. Joel LeBaron, 1950s in Mexico is where they were founded. Primarily in Chihuahua, Mexico. After Joel was murdered by his brother. Murdered.
Do murder and calm go together, Bill? Calm and murder? Murder?
By his brother Ervil LeBaron. You know, you take one letter out and it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
You're just asking for trouble when you name your kid Ervil. I'm just saying, how do you think he's going to grow up?
Yeah. The group fractured, known for murders, blood atonement, and forming a criminal polygamous sect. Here's some of the info from that. This group had no problem, whereas Brigham Young certainly perpetuated violent rhetoric and may have caused violence in Utah and thereabouts. This family absolutely perpetuated violence and caused murder. So there's some pictures from them. There's the book, The Colony, Faith and Blood in a Promised Land by Sally Denton, if you want to know more. And then you've got something here you wanted to add.
Oh, I just threw this in as a postscript to the LeBarons. On November 4th, 2019, many of you may remember this. About 70 miles south of the Mexico-United States border, gunmen opened fire on a 3-car convoy en route to a wedding, carrying a private polygamous wedding, carrying residents of the isolated La Mora community, which is predominantly composed of American-Mexican independent Mormons. 9 people were killed, with some burned alive in a car, 3 women and 6 children, all of whom held dual U.S.-Mexican citizenship. The drug cartel is believed to be behind the attack. And actually what they think is that there were 2 drug cartels who were fighting for power in this area. And the one that had been there the longest had an understanding with these people who were fundamentalist Mormons. But then they ended up running into a group of the other guys who were fighting for control over this territory. And bad things happened. Oh, I'm sorry. I just had the one slide.
That's all right.
See,
so
we do have the Kingstons.
look
We got
at
the
that.
Kingston trio. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley.
Business empire meets polygamy. Now let's see here. I think you read that one. So, all right. The Latter-day Church of Christ, or Kingston clan, blends polygamy with a massive family-run business empire known as the Order. They practice intermarriage within the family. Sounds incestuous. Run numerous enterprises in Utah. And teach that their bloodline is foreordained to build Zion. Oh, Zion can't come fast enough, can it?
Yeah, shades of Rocky Horror.
Oh, leadership stays within the Kingston family, of course. Media outlets often refer to the organization as the Kingston Group, and internally it is known as the Order or the Co-op. I've heard that before. Here's a little chart of how all of that leadership splits off. Frederick Kingston to Charles Kingston, Charles William Kingston.
It is a trio.
To the trio, to the Pentagon or whatever that is, and then Mary Ann Kingston, Lou Ann Kingston, Jeremy Ortel. So anyway, that's the family.
Everywhere at Kingston.
That guy's got a little bit of Joseph Smith charisma there, standing there.
I like it. That's a good picture.
Yeah, I think that's Charles Kingston, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he needs a little more eyebrow pencil.
And then one of the current leaders, Paul Eldon Kingston, again stays in the family. Say that again, RFM. He's got that's a look.
I don't know if I can. I said I think he needs a little more eyebrow pencil.
Yeah, or some more Botox or something.
What before this too?
Yeah,
Hand me my eyebrow pencil.
That's a lot of eyebrow. This one maybe after they were trimmed a bit.
Ooh.
This I think is the original Frederick Kingston.
A very distinguished look.
There's a family. There's the original family there. So there it is. There's a polygamous family. Looks like there's at least 3 or 4 wives there. And this is the group that is the special on escaping polygamy that came out a couple of years ago, around the same time that all of the other Mormon TV shows and TV series came out. And then I'll turn it over to you for the True and Living Church, the Harmston's Apocalyptic Revival.
Yes, and Country Jamboree. Founded in the 1990s by James Harmston in Manti, Utah, the True and Living Church. TLC again. Combined I guess there's no rule that different churches can't have the same name. Combined polygamy with doomsday prophecies, reincarnation, and questionable temple purification rites. Harmston claimed to be Joseph Smith, reincarnated. Predicted the second. We had a lady who called the show Mormonism After Dark once who made that claim, didn't we, Bill? You remember that? Remember that lady who called and she said she was Joseph Smith reincarnated?
Oh yeah. That was a strange moment on the show. We let her talk for a while because that was a fun conversation.
If you're missing Mormonism After Dark on Friday nights, you're missing Mormonism After Dark on Friday nights. Harmston claimed to be Joseph Smith.
You won't want to miss it this Friday. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh, yes. Harmston claimed to be Joseph Smith reincarnated, predicted the second coming by the year 2000. Missed it by that much. And lost most of his following after his death in 2013. What remains is a small fringe group with a colorful history of New Age meets Nauvoo.
So there's Mr. Harmston.
Pit
There's your
stains.
prophet, seer, and revelator. Looks like he's doing something familiar there over on the side. What did you say, RFM?
Nothing. I'm incorrigible tonight. I apologize, everyone. I'm thinking about the barbecue we're going to have on Friday.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening there on the right, but it looks serious. This is Mr. Harmston. His second coming prophecy didn't come true, as most Mormon prophecies don't.
What he's doing is he's saying 3 times, Jesus will come by the year 2000. Jesus will come by the year 2000.
Once more, please.
And so on.
Okay.
Maybe that was the problem. He only did it twice.
He came up with this idea of multiple mortal probations. He didn't invent it, though. This existed in Mormonism.
Oh, yeah.
Multiple mortal probations, which
I came up with the idea myself, along with like millions of other crackpot Mormons.
And it just ties into the, sort of similar to reincarnation with a little more spiritual woo-woo.
Just not in the same planet, right? Not in the same planet life. It's a reincarnation from a different world. So therefore, when Joseph Smith said that reincarnation is a doctrine of the devil, this is okay.
Yep. And I want to note, folks, the phone lines are open. So we'll head here towards the end. 662-667-6667 or 662 Mormons. And then I'll also just copy the link if you want to come into the studio and visit with us that way. Just keep in mind, if you want to be anonymous, make sure you turn the button off on the camera.
And for God's sake, have your clothes on.
Yes, please have your clothes on. We've heard stories.
You heard the story that Rebecca told on the newscast about that lady who accidentally bumped her thing in the book club, and she was completely naked.
Yeah,
and you're missing the Mormon newscast on Monday evenings. You're missing the Mormon newscast on Monday evenings.
And you might want to join, what is it, the Good Book Club? The Mormon Good Book Club. Yeah.
Yes.
You would have seen a few things extra if you would be a part of the
puerile.
Yeah. So there we go. And then this is a meeting house of theirs on the right.
It looks like a red brick store.
It is, and it looks like they just took some sort of shop on Main Street and repurposed it, which is what most of Mormonism did anyway. So it's sort of fitting.
Well, look,
so there's that.
It's a Pinto.
Or a Ford Fiesta. You sure it's a Pinto?
No, I'm not sure. You think it's a Fiesta?
It could be a Ford Fiesta or a Geo Metro. Remember that beautiful car? It got 54 miles to the gallon with an aluminum engine.
Does everybody out there in the audience in the live chat know what I'm talking about? Down here, right picture, bottom, there's a red car heading in the eastern direction. I have no idea if it's going east, but it's right. What is that car? Is that not a Pinto?
It's sort of like today where everything looks like a mini, 80% of the vehicles on the road are these mini SUVs that really are just ugly looking cars. And everybody makes them, which means on some level, everybody got together and went, you know how we could all make more money if we all just made a crappy looking car?
I would say this was taken in the late 70s or early 80s, except it looks pretty beat up. So it could have been taken yesterday.
So there's that. Okay. True and Living Church of Jesus Christ, LDS, they broke off the LDS Church directly. So in spite of doing polygamy, they have nothing to do with the other groups. Radical millennialism, new revelations, emphasis on second anointings, mostly faded after Harmston's death in 2013. And then I'll just note other schisms and spiritual experiments, the forgotten fringe of Mormonism, beyond the major branches of Mormonism, the Brighamites, the Josephites, and the Polygamist Fundamentalists. A wide variety of short-lived, strange, and sometimes scandalous splinter groups emerged. These movements often revolved around one charismatic leader with a new revelation, a bold interpretation of Scripture, or a claim to prophetic succession. Most never gained lasting traction, but they reflect just how fertile and fragmented the Restoration movement was, from seances in Salt Lake to communes in Iowa, from prophets with secret plates to armed standoffs in Utah. These lesser-known sects add color, chaos, and complexity to the Latter-day Saint story. Though small in number, their influence and sometimes their fallout shape the broader Mormon world in surprising ways. So I'll start with you because of
I
Denver
had to add the
Snuffer.
slide for Denver Snuffer Jr.
I didn't have him in there. I somehow forgot Denver and left him off. I hope he doesn't dust his feet off against me. But
No.
you, being a
Good
good
one.
friend of Denver Snuffer, knew that this needed to be mentioned.
When Denver dusts his feet off at you, you know you've had your Denver's feet dusted off at you.
Yeah, you'll know. Not
He's a
like
Utah-
LDS prophecy.
Yeah. I mean, immediately. You won't get 5 steps. A Utah lawyer, an author of restorationist devotional books, a lecturer, a speculative theologian, and claims to be a revelator to fellowships of the remnant movement. This is from Wikipedia, by the way. A spiritual movement in schism with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The movement has a few thousand adherents, many of them members or former members of the LDS Church. He was excommunicated by the LDS Church in 2013 for refusing to cease publication of his 2011 book, Passing the Heavenly Gift. This is my first exposure. I was reading this, which challenges many points of LDS orthodoxy. He subsequently has been identified as a prophet by many in Christian fellowships of the remnants movement, and several of his teachings have been canonized as scripture. And all that's correct. I think that, he resists being called a prophet. That's why I've sometimes referred to him as the reluctant prophet. And it's also why whenever I talk to him on the phone, I say, how's my favorite prophet doing?
But he does claim to have spoken to Jesus Christ himself face to face.
I think so, yeah. I know he claims to have seen Jesus at least once, and I think more than once. And for revelatory purposes, I'm sorry, I don't have it down, so I don't know exactly what the purpose or the communication was, but yeah, absolutely. He's a really nice guy too. I want to go to this one. This was 2 years ago in July when Wendy and he and his wife invited us out to dinner. He picked up the tab. Very, very nice fellow. He's just a normal guy. I feel like when I'm in Denver Snuffer's presence, I can feel some of the charisma that probably drew people to Joseph Smith.
Really cool.
He's not always on.
You and Wendy looking great. Next up, William Law's True Church. In early 1844, Joseph Smith's own counselor, William Law, broke away over secret polygamy and rising authoritarianism. He launched the Nauvoo Expositor, exposing Smith's private doctrines. When Joseph ordered the press destroyed, it triggered the events leading to his death. The Law's church dissolved quickly, but his stand for monogamy and transparency foreshadowed later reformist groups like the RLDS. So there's William Law.
I didn't know he'd started his own church.
He did for just a brief moment. So after reporting that Nauvoo Expositor story, he ended up grabbing a few people into the pews and lasted a short little while. Do you remember the Gladenites, RFM?
No, but I'm happy to hear about them.
Please, will you read this one?
I will. Gladden Bishop, a fringe Mormon elder, claimed to find new plates in Scripture, the Book of Gladden. He gathered a small following and challenged Brigham Young's authority during the Exodus era. While ridiculed at the time, and ever since, some of his followers later joined the Hedrickites, helping them secure the temple lot. He's an early example of the new scripture, new prophet tactic in Mormon offshoots.
This is the Francis Gladden Bishop episode we did. This is the Gladenites.
Oh, my goodness.
Orgies, and sacred relics.
You know something? I can understand. We put out so much stuff. I can understand if people who even consume it to listen to all of it, to binge it over and over. I can understand it if you don't remember everything we've talked about. What concerns me is I don't remember everything we've talked about. I remember maybe 50% of what we've talked about.
I understand that. I experienced that a lot too. If you remember, though, he claimed he had the sacred relics of Mormonism, 116 pages, the Liahona, the crown, I think a crown maybe of like Nephi. He had the plates, he had the Urim and Thummim, the breastplate, the sword of Laban, but they never turned up, strangely enough. That was Francis Gladden and the Gladenites. If you remember, too, he printed an address to the sons and daughters of Zion scattered abroad through all the earth, and the ensign of light of Zion, shepherd of Israel, and book of remembrance. Those
One of
were
the things I
Francis,
envy about you, Bill, is your memory.
Francis Gladden Bishop. Yeah. Memory might be a little better on me, but you have exponentially better memory of specific things. So,
And
uh,
looks. Don't forget looks.
yeah, don't forget the good looks you've got too. All right. Charles B. Thompson and the Benemites.
I was
I don't
wondering
know
how you're going to do that.
the Benem. Yeah, we'll figure it out here. Thompson claimed to be a Benemi. Thompson claimed to be a Benemi, a mysterious figure from Joseph Smith's revelations. He formed a commune in Iowa, collected tithes, declared his own priesthood authority, but when followers demanded
Can you
transparency,
hang on a second? Can we go down to number 1 now? We've got a footnote 1, and
Yeah.
Benemi or whatever is killing me. I mean, with Benemis like these, who needs friends?
the 1854 edition, I believe, of the Book of Mormon, or no, I'm sorry, Doctrine and Covenants, maybe Book of Commandments, also established the need for a textual change. Orson Pratt, who was in charge of publishing that edition, discovered that a disaffected member named Charles B. Thompson was publishing a newspaper containing revelations he supposedly had received from Benemi. Since Benemi was the code name for the elders that Joseph had given in section 105, verse 27, D&C 105:27, Elder Pratt proposed that the real names be printed in the next edition, thus exposing Thompson. So they have a code word meaning the elders. Thompson is utilizing that for his own gain, claiming that's a mysterious person.
Well, Benemi must be his code name.
And in reality, it meant, I think it means the elders. And so when they printed the next book, rather than keeping the secrecy, they just went ahead and used the elders. And that would expose Thompson for falsely claiming that it was him. Because changes in the stereotype plates would have been so costly, the changes were actually made in the 1876 edition. So if you get an 1854 edition of the D&C, open it to 105:27, that word, Benemi, whatever it is, that would be in there. So now I'll finish. He formed a commune in Iowa, collected tithes, declared his own priesthood authority, but when followers demanded transparency, Thompson vanished with the money. At least our prophets, seers, and revelators hang around with the money. They don't just vanish. They stick around. Known mockingly as the Conjupricites.
I'm so sorry. I was looking at what?
The Conjupricites. His group collapsed.
Oh, of course, the Conjupricites.
Yeah, but their communal zeal and scriptural creativity mirrored Mormonism's early experiments in theocratic living.
Is that Cojones-Pricites? No.
There is the Charles Thompson. There is some things he wrote, evidences of the people of the Book of Mormon, and then the Zion Harbinger and Benemi's organ. That could get. Might want to turn.
You hear about the streaker in church, Bill?
Yeah, you might want to turn your safe.
By the organ.
Yeah. Will you explain to us the Morosites?
Oh, I was looking up Charles B. Thompson and this crazy thing about Benemi. I was looking at Benemi. Okay. Long and tan and young and lovely, the girl from East Benemi goes walking. Morosites and the Morosite War, 1861 to 62. Joseph Morris was a British convert in Utah who declared himself a prophet and predicted the second coming. Boy, that gets really tiresome after a while, doesn't it? You know, is there anybody out there who hasn't predicted the second coming wrongly? If so, raise your hand, please. He founded the Church of the Firstborn and led followers to a commune near Ogden. After legal standoffs, the Utah militia attacked in what became the Morosite War, leaving Morris and several others dead. His followers fled but continued in scattered groups for decades. Morris introduced reincarnation into Mormon fringe theology, influencing later sects like the LeBarons. He also introduced into Mormonism the Morris dance.
All right. The Kington.
I thought you said we were almost done half an hour ago.
Yeah, I know. We got a few, and there's a few more left, but we need to, let's squeeze these in really quick. The phone lines are open, and you do have the link to come into the studio if folks want to. All right. So let me go back here. The
Kington. There's no S.
Morosite War Site. I'm not
Kingpin.
going to read that. I'm just going to note that that monument's there. You can read it online.
Oh.
Joseph Morris in the Saga of the Morrisites. This is a piece of property that still exists today that notes that religious group and the land that they occupied. Here's a piece of art depicting the Morrisite War. Reminds me a little bit of the Danites, not the Danites, the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which there's a piece of art that has a similar sort of watercolor look to it.
No. Well, no wonder he looks so upset.
Yeah, that's great hair. It makes him look like he's the devil himself, doesn't it?
Like an early version of Sister Betril.
Yeah, there you go. So the Godbeites in Salt Lake, William Godbey and other intellectuals rebelled against Brigham Young's economic control and dogmatism. They embraced spiritualism, seances, and religious liberalism. Their church faded quickly, but they left a lasting mark, founding the Salt Lake Tribune. Didn't know that. And opening Utah's cultural gates to outside ideas. The Godbeites were the first to say, what if authority isn't the point? Okay. So there is William S. Godbey, 2 images of him. And there is an article out there, if you want to read it, by Ronald Walker. Not to be confused with Ronald's Little Factory. This is the Wayward Saints, the Godbeites, and Brigham Young. So if you want to know more about them, there it is.
The Whitmerites.
Yeah, please tell us about the Whitmerites, RFM.
Just when you thought it wasn't possible, there were any more Mormon offshoots. The Whitmerites, the Church of Christ, led by David Whitmer, a Book of Mormon witness. The Whitmerites rejected all post-Kirtland LDS developments, including temples, polygamy, and centralized leadership. They used only the Book of Mormon and early revelations, in addition to the Bible, though, right, Bill?
Correct.
The group faded by the 1920s, with many merging into the Temple Lot Church, but Whitmer's final pamphlet, an address to all believers in Christ, which is right over here within arm's reach, influenced the RLDS and others who opposed Nauvoo-era innovations.
And a picture of Whitmer on the left there, that's the youngest photo I've ever seen of him. On the right is the one that I've seen most often. That one has been, I think, touched up a bit, so it looks really good for its age. And then in the middle is him towards the very end of his life. You can see that age is getting the best of him. And then this is my favorite. I can never get past this. I always tell people, I've said it multiple times in episodes, Joseph Smith was 13 years old when he began to scam people. And when he got his first seer stone and started treasure digging, and people go, come on, it's a 13-year-old boy. And I go, you know what? You know what's even worse than a 13-year-old boy scamming people? An 11-year-old boy scamming people. James C. Brewster, the 11-year-old prophet, along with former apostle Hazen Aldrich, formed a short-lived church and published The Olive Branch. They led a migration effort to California, which failed. Brewster later left Mormonism altogether. Their movement is notable mostly for its ambition and youth trying to restart Zion in the West without Brigham or Joseph. That is James Brewster, and James Brewster wrote Revelation down as well. Righteousness, the words of righteousness to all men, an address to the Church of Christ and Latter-day Saints, and a very important to the Mormon money diggers. All of these written by James Colin Brewster, 11-year-old prophet, seer, and revelator. And he ended up disappearing. I don't think we really know what happened to him. He took his group west, and I don't know that we know where he ended up, and we don't know anything about his death. He just vanished. But, I should say that. I am wrong. We don't have the story of his death, but we do have his burial site, James Brewster tombstone.
And we're certain that's he? Or could that be another case of Ishmael?
What? Say that again?
We're sure that's he, or could this be another case of Ishmael?
When you find James Brewster on family history search sites, they show this as his tombstone. And by the description of him, it's obvious that we're talking the same James Brewster. So I assume this is the same James Brewster tombstone, although whoever does the family history sites with his family absolutely attribute this as his tombstone.
I would explain that reference, but it's just too complicated. So hopefully you're keeping up on this one. I was also thumbing through my copy of An Address to All Believers in Christ.
Nice.
By David Whitmer.
Yeah.
Where one of the things he says is that the voice that came to him from God telling him to get the heck away from Joseph Smith's church and Joseph Smith was every bit as audible, as real as from heaven as was his witness of the gold plates.
Yes. And everybody who's interested in Mormon history should read that pamphlet.
I've been trying to get my way through it. You know, it's a long pamphlet. They had long pamphlets back then. I mean, and there's a lot of words on each page, no pictures. You know, it's not easy. But I keep getting distracted, and I've had this here for months now. Eventually, I've got a lot of things that are highlighted and underlined, but nowhere near the work that needs to go into it to create it into a podcast. But just talking about some of the amazing things that are here in what this person, this witness to the translation, to everything, has to say about it years later in retrospect. And I figure if we can't take his word for this, well, we better be able to take his word for what he says later. Otherwise, we're going to have a tough time distinguishing it from his word for his vision of the Book of Mormon plates. Okay, so this is Lost Christianities, the battles for scripture and the faiths we never knew. Brewster by Bart D. Ehrman. And the entire purpose of this book, I think it came out around 20 years ago. And I read it then, and I looked through it again to try and find what it was I was looking for. It's on the back. It'll do. It's the next one. The entire thesis of the book is the idea that there is a general idea that is common currency, that the further you go back in time toward the origin of the Christian church, the more all these different groups, right, that have sprung up, they'll all come back into one and merge into one, and there will be one true one. And that's what we will find. That's what everybody's been trying to do, has been trying to go back to restore or reform, get the original church back on the earth, right? That's what they've all been trying to do. So he says the amazing thing is that with the historical record that we have, as far back as we can go into Christianity, in first century Christianity, basically as soon as Jesus dies, there's like all these different sects of Christianity. They just immediately. In fact, we can read about some of them in the letters in the New Testament. They're referenced, these other opposing groups. No matter who you think is right, the fact that they are in existence already, in Paul's day at least, is obvious. And then there are other evidences that he goes into in his book. And if we can go to the next one, I'll put it over here. Yeah, it's these two quotes, one from Elaine Pagels from Princeton University, who wrote the Gnostic Gospels, did a lot of great work into the Nag Hammadi, isn't it? That's the one in Egypt. I think so, 1945. Yeah. This book offers a fascinating introduction to an astonishing range of lost Christianities that flourished at the time when the Christian movement began. See? That's what it's saying. An astonishing range of lost Christianities that flourished at the time when the Christian movement began. And you can basically see a similar thing in Mormonism. That's why it's incredible. We are looking at a replication of ancient Christianity today in Mormonism in so many ways. Bart Ehrman has the rare gift of communicating scholarship in writing that is lively, enjoyable, and accessible. Yeah, I think it is. And then Elizabeth A. Clark from Duke University says, highly readable and based on up-to-date scholarship, 20 years old now. Ehrman's book, at least my edition is, Ehrman's book provides an excellent introduction to early Christianity's diversity and the means by which early Orthodoxy and the New Testament canon developed from it. This lively study will prove eye-opening to a wide variety of readers, including Radio Free Mormon. So, yeah, I wanted to make that point because it's not just an exercise in looking at all these things. I mean, what we're seeing is how it happened originally. It's like we could go back to the creation, 6,000 years, Bill. If we could go back 6,000 years to the creation and have a seat on a cloud and just watch how it happened, it would be amazing. Well, that's kind of what we have here with Mormonism.
All right. And that was our final slide. RFM, I appreciate that too, by the way, because as you point out, this idea that there's a restoration, and yet if we go another 150, 200 years into the future, there will be 10 or 15 more LDS groups that break off sometime along that way. And there'll just be more Mormonism. And this idea that God got rid of the confusion, because when we got Mormonism, we went out to preach the gospel, to teach people, to give out Book of Mormons. And one of the messages we gave was that all of Christianity is so confused. There's so many of them. How can you know what is the right Christianity? Well, it's the Book of Mormon, and it's what Mormonism has to offer. And when you actually look at Mormonism, it has the exact same problem.
And Bill, we also said on the mission, right? And off the mission, if the Book of Mormon is true, Joseph Smith was a prophet. And if Joseph Smith was a prophet, this church is the only true church on the face of the earth. We never, ever mentioned any other options.
Yeah, except that maybe there's 400 other LDS churches, Mormon churches, breakoffs of this variation that have, in some ways, just as much, if not a stronger claim to the truth and leadership.
But we're the biggest.
I guess that's what counts. Then if that's true, then Islam is true, you know?
God likes big.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of tonight's episode. There's the thumbnail again. I'll take that off the screen. If anybody wants to call in, otherwise we can just end the show because there wasn't any calls in the queue. And so...
what do you say to a show like this? It's been so encyclopedic, so expansive. We've answered all questions.
All knocked down. RFM, what's that shirt you're wearing tonight, by the way? It's a cool looking shirt.
Thank you very much. You may know this fellow? Deadpool, the merc with the mouth.
Look at that.
1991, I think, is when he came into creation. The year's on the back. I think it's a 91.
Ryan Reynolds redeemed himself after that Green Lantern movie and took on Deadpool.
He will never be able to redeem himself from the Green Lantern movie.
All right. Well, folks, please join us on Friday night. There's no calls in the queue, so we'll just end the show here. Please stop by on Friday night. We start at 8 p.m., so it'll be the Mormonism After Dark time. It may end up being a special episode of Mormonism Live, and you won't want to miss it. We'll have a full crew here. We'll dive into some data. And we'll see what we find. So there's that.
Yes, bring your magnifying glass and your deer stalker cap.
And with that, so long, everybody. Good night. Thank you for joining us here at Mormonism Live. See you Friday at 8 p.m. Visit mormonismlive.org to get the past episodes. Also check out the YouTube channel here at Mormon Discussion. And please, if you can support us, go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, and send us a few dollars. It's what helps us to keep doing episodes like this and like Friday. So have a great night, everybody. Thank you, RFM, and see everybody soon.
Good night.